In a remarkable series of events spanning policy pronouncements, religious appeals, and courtroom battles, former President Donald J. Trump has become, time and again, his own most formidable adversary. Through a succession of public statements and executive actions, Mr. Trump has inadvertently handed opponents decisive ammunition, eroding both his legal defenses and his political credibility. Trump's propensity for self-sabotage is not a new phenomenon. Throughout his political career, the former president has alternated between bombastic rhetoric and contradictory declarations, often leaving allies scrambling to repair the fallout. Whether through impromptu interviews, social media missives, or official White House communications, each misstep has compounded the narrative that Trump is his own worst enemy. A clear illustration emerged in 2024 when Trump took to Twitter to warn that a victory by Vice President Kamala Harris would trigger an economic collapse akin to the Great Depression of 1929. The tweet conjured images of mass unemployment and financial ruin, an alarmist claim designed to frighten the electorate. Yet mere weeks later, in a televised interview, Trump was asked if he would accept a recession as a necessary step toward fulfilling his broader economic objectives. He replied candidly, "Is it okay in the short term to have a recession? Yeah, everything's okay. I said this is a transition period." Such equivocation not only undercut the severity of his own warning, but also exposed a willingness to sacrifice near-term economic stability for long-term political gain. Similarly, Trump's approach to religion has swung between reverence and ridicule. Delivering the invocation for the National Day of Prayer, he proclaimed, "For America to be a great nation, we must always be one nation under God," vowing to defend that phrase against efforts by the radical left to remove it. Yet days later, the official White House social media account published an image casting Trump as the Pope, a tongue-in-cheek montage that many Catholics and evangelicals found deeply offensive, by alternately pandering to and mocking religious constituencies. Trump alienated both devout voters who expect solemnity in faith matters and secular Americans wary of the blending of church and state. On the legal front, Trump has honed his critique of the Justice Department under President Biden, denouncing it as the Department of Injustice and vowing to purge probationary employees implicated in politicized prosecutions. An internal memo issued on White House stationery authorized such terminations, citing staff involvement in events near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Yet this very tactic mirrors the practices he condemned, underscoring the irony of a man who lambasted weaponized prosecutions while employing identical measures when the political winds shifted. Nowhere has Trump's self-undermining been more glaring than in the high-stakes case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Mr. Garcia, a Maryland resident, was wrongfully deported under a Trump-era immigration directive. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court unequivocally ordered the administration to facilitate his return. In a recent ABC interview, Trump was asked whether he would comply. He answered, "I could. With all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, 'Send him back right now.' If he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that. But the court has ordered you to facilitate that. I'm not the one making this decision." By openly admitting that he has the authority to obey the court but chooses not to, Trump eviscerated the central pillar of his legal defense, that he lacks the power to act. The significance of this admission cannot be overstated. Judge Paulinis, presiding over Garcia's case, has already signaled interest in expanded discovery. Lawyers for Mr. Garcia intend to subpoena senior officials, potentially including Trump advisor Stephen Miller, to unveil who counseled defiance of a Supreme Court mandate. Even some of Trump's closest allies fear this revelation could shatter the administration's argument that the president had no viable option but capitulation. Further compounding the controversy is the administration's reliance on dubious tattoo evidence. Officials claimed that 4 modest symbols inked on Mr. Garcia's fingers: a skull, a smiley face, a marijuana leaf, and an ostensibly altered MS-13 logo proves ties to the notorious gang. Yet leading gang research experts, including court-certified witnesses, have attested that such designs are generic and bear no specific gang affiliation. Moreover, the image paraded in the Oval Office was digitally manipulated. Letters and numbers spelling MS-13 was superimposed onto the photograph. No substantive confirmation has emerged to verify that the true tattoos read anything beyond those innocuous symbols. For Mr. Garcia and his family, the stakes are intensely personal. They endured 50 days of limbo, uncertain of his fate and resolute in the belief that due process should apply regardless of one's background. Public statements from his children describe pain and uncertainty as they watched US officials dismiss the gravity of his wrongful removal. The family's ordeal spotlights the human cost of political theatre and legal brinkmanship. Collectively, these episodes chart a consistent trajectory. Every time Trump seeks to reinforce his image, whether as economic saviour, devout leader, or champion of law and order, he undercuts himself with contradictory or legally fraught assertions. His economic warnings give way to tacit acceptance of recession. His calls for religious unity dissolve into parody. His denunciations of politicised justice morph into identical tactics. And his courtroom defences are undone by his own frank admissions. As this investigative report has shown, Donald Trump's greatest adversary is, unequivocally, Donald Trump. Each misstep lays bare a leader unable to reconcile rhetoric with reality, authority with accountability. Whether these self-inflicted wounds will alter the course of his political future or the outcomes of his legal challenges remains to be seen. What is beyond dispute, however, is that in the intersections of policy, faith and jurisprudence, the former president continues to trip over the very obstacles he erects for others. Fought for a couple of seconds, in the coming weeks, the courtroom drama surrounding Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case is poised to enter a decisive phase. Judge Paulinis has signalled that failure to comply with his order may warrant contempt proceedings, a rare escalation that carries potential fines or even coercive measures against senior administration officials. Legal scholars have observed that a president's explicit refusal to adhere to a Supreme Court ruling strikes at the heart of the American separation of powers. Should the court find that Mr. Trump's admission constitutes willful defiance, it could set a precedent for limiting executive discretion in the face of clear judicial mandates. Yet another dimension in which Trump's candid remarks undermine not only his defense, but broader constitutional norms. Simultaneously, the applications for expanded discovery are expected to uncover internal memos and communications. If subpoenas reach figures such as Stephen Miller or other policy architects, their testimony may reveal who counselled resistance to the court's directive. That discovery could, in turn, illuminate whether the refusal was a principled stand on executive prerogative or simply a political gambit. Either way, the spectre of internal dissent, reports already indicate concern among some White House confidants, will only fuel narratives of chaos within the administration and raise questions about the command and control structure at the nation's highest levels. Beyond the courtroom, this episode has rippled through the Republican Party. While Trump's base remains fiercely loyal, a growing number of lawmakers have expressed unease at the prospect of overt constitutional confrontation. Moderate Republicans in particular fear alienating swing voters troubled by the administration's apparent contempt for due process. These internal strains reflect a broader debate over whether political loyalty should override adherence to institutional checks and balances. In this light, Trump's own words threaten to erode the very coalition that propelled him to power. Finally, the human consequences of this debacle cannot be overstated. Mr. Garcia's ordeal, 10 weeks of displacement and public mischaracterization, has underscored the tangible cost of political theatre. His case serves as a stark reminder that behind every policy dispute are real individuals whose lives hang in the balance as the legal battle unfolds. The public will be watching not only for judicial rulings, but for indications of whether American governance to withstand the pressures of partisanship and personality alike. In sum, Donald Trump's repeated self-immolations, whether through economic scare tactics, oscillating religious posturing, or brazen defiance of the Supreme Court, have culminated in a singular vulnerability: the exposure of a presidency that too often substitutes unchecked impulse for deliberate statesmanship. As the judiciary prepares to hold him to account, the former president's own words have done more than undermine his case. They have ignited a conversation about the resilience of democratic institutions in the face of willful ambiguity. Ultimately, the most enduring legacy of this controversy may be less a question of one man's fate and more a test of America's commitment to the rule of law.